the first thing to say to farmers is that we want to create a model that will be replicated in various parts of the country and even internationally. Yes. And there are a number of spaces available now throughout the country and internationally. Farmers who may not be maximizing the potential of their land. And instead of turning to corporate measures, we can work with them and talk to them about how this model can benefit their local community. I think that by engaging the local resources of their area, wherever that may be, by bringing in the artists from the local communities, the surrounding communities, and by tapping into the local resources that these spaces are already adjacent to, we can map this model onto a lot of different locales and work with a lot of different people to create this kind of community. So if there's a farmer out there who is not using his or her space to kind of a maximal advantage and is thinking that there's something else that can be done with that space, something more community-based, something less, something a little less corporate, then this is a model that can be used. And it can be used to really enrich that space in ways that perhaps the old models can't really culturally enrich. So that's one thing I think that farmers should know about our project. I think that philanthropists should know about this project because I think many people want to give back to their own community in a very interesting, innovative way. And they are wondering, how can I provide an inspirational aspect to my own community? And they may be donating to a museum. They may be donating to the local symphony. They may be providing for other even more essential and basic needs that a community might have. What's great about our project is that it actually combines these basic needs with so much culture and so much kind of enlightened artistic thinking. So we bring both together. And so anyone who's interested in providing for their community or engaging their community in a philanthropic way is going to become very... Not only does the project engage essentials in the community, providing food, providing basic resources to their community, but it also enlivens and enriches the community because it provides so much cultural influx. And so even though there can be an international component to our communities, artists come from everywhere to participate, not only on a local level, but they can also come internationally and work on this community, work on the farm, and also do their own work. So there is an international component, but there's also a local component. And that international component really enriches the local environment. So anybody interested in providing something special for their locale, for their own community, is going to take a long look at this project and say, how can we implement something like this here? This is a really exciting idea. We want this here. This is going to be in New England. It's going to be in the Hudson Valley. Well, where else is it going to be? What other communities really will benefit from this? And people in their own locales who want to provide something special to their communities are going to want to tap into this and reproduce an agricultural, artistic environment where they are too. So I think that's something that I think is important for philanthropists to hear. You could be someone in the Hudson Valley who needs this to happen. You could be someone in Atlanta, Georgia, who needs this to happen. You could be someone in California who says, how come something like this isn't happening here? How come something like this isn't happening where you are in Montana?
And they want it to happen.
And you want it to happen.
They can help to do that.
Yeah, and we're creating the model for that. But we need philanthropists to step up, not only because we need to partner with them, but we need them to help us identify where communities like this are going to thrive, where they have already been thinking about this themselves. These are ideas that are already on the table. So we need to collaborate with these people to help lead us to the right communities.
And the reason we're talking about that is because, yeah, these communities will take capital to get them on the road. And once they're up and running, then they're sustainable and they're able to actually recoup some of that investment through farming export, through cultural export, and all the products that this community can produce.
One of the great aspects of this community is the numerous revenue streams that it opens up.
Right. So the capital is not merely build the community and then they sustain and live. It's an ongoing, alive body that's creating things, and like you say, a lot of revenue streams.
There's a fundamental agricultural revenue stream that feeds the community. It feeds the people inside the community, outside the local community. It feeds the entire operation and out.
You can do that with all of it. The water, the energy, and the food can all be exported.
The energy exports, that's another revenue stream.
Can all be exported.
The cultural exports are innumerable and invaluable. The cultural exports of a community like this add a dynamic and almost unpredictable revenue stream that could generate beyond anyone's imagination in terms of the kinds of artists we cultivate.
They kind of changed the whole socialization of that area. Whereas you might be going out to a farm where, let's say, on the evenings and the weekends, really nothing was happening except nature was doing what it's doing. And here now you have this cultural input component coming along, and people going, "Oh, what's that?" And that's something that people. Personally, I think people need that. I think a lot of philanthropists and farmers or people who have land also would enjoy that, especially enjoy their contribution being part of that. I think that's something that's really intangible, but I think it's real.
I think the hook on all of this is what's next. What's next? What's the next model? We know that the suburban model doesn't work. We know that the corporate model doesn't work. We know that previous models just are not working. They're not sustainable. And more than not sustainable, they're not regenerative. That's really the new way of looking at it. We can't afford to just sustain ourselves anymore. We've already compromised the earth beyond its capacity to simply sustain. Things actually are not sustaining. We have set in motion principles that are global climate change. We've set in motion principles that are moving now without our control. So we can't afford to just be sustainable anymore. We have to create a model that actually regenerates and recuperates the earth. And in so doing, redefines a way of living as a community. And that idea is not a religious idea. It's not a social idea. It's simply a way of addressing the environmental issues we face. That's the bottom line. And one of the ways that we're addressing that issue is by bringing together great minds to work in a community that can address these issues in innovative ways. And it just so happens that many great minds are many young artists.
They think creatively.
They think creatively.
Outside the box.
Exactly. They think outside of the box. Exactly.
Right.
So the kind of ideas that we're going to generate in this model and the kinds of cooperative action we're going to generate in this model, that's well and beyond this idea of this old model of having an expert come in.
Oh yeah.
We're done with that model of let's have an expert come in. Right?
Pay somebody.
Let's pay, exactly, really, let's pay an expert, right? That model's over. We're going to generate great ideas within a community of young artists who are all contributing to the problem. They're all contributing their ideas to solve these global problems, but they're all doing it on a local level.
Let's talk a little bit about the logistics of something like this. Here you have this community. We have this site. We understand there's zoning issues and all that, and we want to formulate a community that's within that envelope, however they require. But then we have the component of the people who are going to come in. This is where Etche would play a large part in vetting the artist to see who's actually able to contribute to as we need to. Especially in the beginning, these communities need to have really active participants. Later, when you're proliferating these communities everywhere, there's going to be the active and the inactive, and it's going to, people are going to be that way.
Right.
But in the beginning, we're looking for not only landowners who actually also want to participate and be part of this goal, philanthropists do the same, but also the artists.
Right.
And that's where your experience with bringing in people who have you vetted basically, and said, okay, yeah, you qualify for this.
Well, I think one of the important ways to look at this community is that it is an art space, just like any other art space. And we have models for that, so we know what that's like. People are running art spaces across the country. McDowell, Yaddo, the Virginia Center, Art OMI, we know about all of these art spaces. So it's important, I think, for people to use that as a principal frame for what we're doing. If they say, we don't really understand what's going on here, you can go to the art space model and look at that as kind of a basic foundation for what we do. Now, the reason this project is so innovative is that on top of that model, we're bringing in sustainable agriculture. Now, if you simply think of those two components, you'll have a great image in your mind of what we're trying to do. We're creating an environment for artists to think, and create, and contribute to some of the major solutions of today's global problems on a local level. And we're using the basis for that conversation, sustainable agriculture. That's the basis for that conversation. So we're saying, let's all get together here, just like any functioning art space would get together, would solicit artists. But then, by providing the foundation of sustainable agriculture, and also just regenerative culture, right? So it's sustainable food, water, and energy, right? So simply by providing those components, you spark a community that is engaged in how those key factors are integral to solving some of our global problems.
Right, and one of the biggest differences between this kind of model and the guys who want to unplug from society and do the same thing is that we actually want to, we're not going off grid, we actually want to become the grid. We want to become the norm. And that's the big difference between calling this some kind of a commune or an off-grid or throw away the key.
Right, it's simply not that.
Doing the opposite.
It's like the future subdivision somehow.
We're inviting the public in. We're inviting the public in to say this is an alternate to living the way you are, but in the same place.
And
you don't have to move.
And I think the innovative basis for this project is that it begins not only with sustainable food, water, energy. There's a lot of places that already embrace those values.
Right.
But how many of those places have as their foundation an art space, a cultural center? That's the bottom line, because the foundation of a cultural center means that you cannot be isolated. You cannot be insular, because the whole basis of the creation of art is within a larger community.
Right, it needs input from the outside, and it needs to go somewhere too. That creativity can't just be always inside. People say, oh, I've heard that before.
Right.
It's got to be always shared, and that's why we want to have that. The symbol of this for our community, the initial community, is that greeting area and the building where people will come in and interact right away with everything going on here at a sort of a showcase, and then they go out through the back door, so to speak, and into this experience, and realize that this is all one. This is very easy to go in and out of.
But one thing we've talked about is this idea that these components, all of these components, they already exist. They're all there.
They're all
People are already. People are. There's nothing innovative about doing regenerative, sustainable water, energy, food. People are doing that. There's nothing innovative about running an art space. People are doing that. What's innovative about this project is the combination of those elements and the thinking through of how those elements will create something innovative and special that has actually not happened in our culture yet, and that could potentially be a sub-plantation of the suburban model. Mm-hmm. Something that can be replicated locally, but across the country mm-hmm. and internationally, but always on a local level, that has the implications of being a supplanting right. of older models that simply are not working anymore.
Mm-hmm. And we don't have to limit it to suburban. It definitely it could be an urban model.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the potential's there.
Right.
It's pretty simple.
Mm-hmm. You can feed yourself on half an acre, quarter acre.
Yeah, quarter acre, 4 people.
Right.
10 by 10 with aquaponics.
10 by, yeah.
That's what it is.
10 by 10. You can feed
10
yourself.
by 10.
10 square feet right here.
And as a matter of fact, there are aquaponics people that we know today that are working on an apartment model mm-hmm. for growing your own food. Mm-hmm. Imagine having a 1-bedroom apartment and you're growing your own food.
Right. You could grow. I could grow more than enough food for myself right here. Just raised bed gardening. Just raised bed gardening. Yeah.
This is what, probably 12 by 12, I bet.
Sure. No, there's
the 10 by 10 is actually just one level. You can actually do levels with the grow lights mm-hmm. and multiply your efforts. Mm-hmm. So it does work.
One more thing I want to say just about my own background with my own organization.
Get it all in there now.
Sure, yeah, I'll get it all in there now. So in 2005, when I was still a graduate student, I was working loosely with artists to put on concerts and organize various.
Was that here? That was here in Boston, right?
Yeah, that was in Boston. Yeah.
Okay.
And in 2008, I went to the Virginia Center for Creative Arts with a proposal to start a music festival. So I had been a fellow at the Virginia Center for Creative Arts previously in 2006, and I had a wonderful time there, and I got to know the people. So in 2008, I went back, and I had a proposal for a music festival, and we began to collaborate. Mm-hmm. I noticed at that point, I realized the necessity for having my own nonprofit. So I incorporated my nonprofit as Etche.
Okay, that was in 2008.
That was in, and that came, we finally finished the paperwork for that in 2009. So we became a nonprofit in 2009.
Okay.
And partnering with the Virginia Center for Creative Arts on an art space that they own in France, we started a music festival. So now every summer I run this festival with my own nonprofit, which is still very small, partnered with the Virginia Center. So that's been going on now 5 years. We'll have our 5th year this coming summer, 2013. And we're already organizing that.
Right, it takes a while.
It takes a year to organize. Every you start in the fall, you plan through the spring, it happens in the summer. You take a little break, you start in the fall planning again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what I want to say is that from the beginning of all of this, I had it in my mind that it would be very beneficial to our culture to have more opportunities for young artists to gather together as a community of thinkers, expressing themselves in a safe place where they could take risks, think creatively, and that this was an environment that had always helped me quite a lot. So I was out of school. I wanted that environment back because it was so nourishing to me. So why not create it? Why not have that happening every summer? Through producing this summer festival every summer, what I came to notice is that while it's quite successful in its own way, it doesn't integrate some of the other things that I'm very passionate about. And I'm also extremely passionate about local food and sustainable energy. Mm-hmm. And that's just from my own personal background and my own family background, being raised in the Southwest, being raised in the country with a real awareness of our integration into nature, and that sense of having nature so close to me as a young person coming into this metro area and feeling a little removed from all of that, really engaging in the arts and starting this festival, but never having this part of myself really realized. So by bringing in principles of sustainable living and farming and food into something that is also rooted in the arts, that I think is my fullest expression. That's, I think, where I can really contribute the most. So that's where this art space started to come from in my own mind. Having a place, just like the Etchings Festival in France that we run with the VCCA. Having a festival just like that, except having it in the United States, having it closer to home, broadening it out to include all the arts, and supporting it from the bottom with other principles such as sustainable agriculture, clean energy, and creating an environment for artists to really tap into that. Once I started to figure out that connection myself, I came to find out that so many artists share the same principles. They share the same need, they share the same wants, they share the same interests. And that actually combining these principles of sustainable energy, food, water, and cultivating the arts, those principles actually go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. And that the combination of those ideas was a really tight fit.
Right. You brought up that point about risk, which is interesting because you get an artist who in this current state of economics, he wants to take a risk and spend a lot of time on his art. Well, that means he can't go work, or he has to get a night job. Mm-hmm. And he's risking a lot of debt and everything else if he's doing that. Now, here in a community like the sustainable community, he can come up with something really off the wall that he wants to express, however it is, through visual art, music, and if it's not received at the time, it's fine. He's got a community to fall back on. He can go back to the drawing board and create something new without saying, "Oh my God, now I'm really behind the 8 ball now because I haven't been paying my bills."
That's the problem with the
time doing that.
The way you're talking about the risk, that's the way the government was really pushing the entire suburban model. They want no risk. They're trying to take the risk out of everything. Government really does force no risk. And
yeah, in a way, they want everything to just exist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, you get up in the morning, go to work, you come home, you go to sleep, watch TV.
They like that pay model as well.
And you pay for that.
Yeah, I mean, they want people to pay for everything because that's an accounting thing, and they can tax everything then. This is completely different.
Right. But I think for the artist, there's a really a great safety net in this kind of
thing. It really is, because we're teaching them how to sustain themselves, and they have the freedom to do it forever. So there really is no risk on their part.
But you have this other thing that can also develop, and it probably will, is you bring out the artist and people who don't see themselves as an artist when they start partaking in this community. I myself, I went to school first as a musician, and then I changed to engineering, and I realized there's a lot of creativity in engineering, more so than people think. People think you just draw a drawing, there's a couple of bolts that hold something together, and it's very technical. But there's a lot of art to that. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. But there's when I started gardening and doing that in my personal life, I realized that was a creative outpouring of what I really felt like I was doing, creating something. And I think there's going to be a kind of an awakening happening with this kind of movement of people that didn't realize that there's an artist in them. And it needs to be honed, but they have to do that themselves, and it's in some kind of environment which allows that. And right now, even with music, I was always disappointed with modern music. Oh, I like some rock and roll, I like some jazz, blues, but in the same sense, a lot of it is, as you grow up, you hear this music played over and over and over again, like even on the radio or on the, now it's on iTunes or whatever. It's like they're playing it so often that now you like it because you just heard it so much. But really, you didn't really like it, and you listen to the words, and what are they singing about? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The creativity is sort of canned, And you know how it is for a lot of artists. They come to the studio and they say, well, you got to sing this.
Right.
Because we know this will sell. And the guy doesn't want to sing it. His heart is not into it, or her heart is not into it. And then they turn to other things to, you know, whatever it is. You know, so it's like a crash and burn type effect, even though they have money.
Churn and burn.
Churn and burn. They have money, but they don't have happiness.
Well,
They have fulfillment, right?
one of the
You gotta be yourself.
Exactly. I don't want to sing that.
Yeah.
One of the issues is this idea that our current culture anesthetizes. Our current culture anesthetizes through what you're talking about, which is this constant inundation. Well, we're inundated with stimulation, right? We're inundated with the Facebook and Twitter, everything on the internet. The media inundates us with stimuli.
And it's addicting.
And it is addicting, and what it winds up doing is anesthetizing us. What we want to do is aesthetize people. We want to create an aesthetic for people to enjoy, not an anesthetic.
So the inside comes out instead of shutting it down.
Right. The current culture is a kind of anesthetic.
No, it is.
And one of the principles behind this idea of an art space built with sustainable values is the aesthetic value that it will create.
Mm-hmm. Very good. No, I agree with that. I totally see that. I can feel that with this whole movement that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
That's what attracts me so much to it, even though you know, it seems like initially it may be a lot of work or that, and I'm starting to realize that it's really not a lot of work. It's
Well, the more we
more
think
fulfilling. Work is the old adage from economists is always work is irksome. That means something you don't like to do.
But this is no different
This is
than
not really work.
cooking or taking a shower. I mean, it's really just part of life. Most of what we're doing here.
Right, and you can make it enjoyable.
Yeah.
The cooking can be enjoyable, or you can say, oh, no, I gotta cook it.
Right.
So you make it enjoyable. It's almost you look forward to doing it again.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're integrating it into lifestyle. That's the difference.
Right.
It's becoming lifestyle. So once something is lifestyle, well, I enjoy my lifestyle.
Now you're getting enjoyment out of it instead of seeing it as an intrusion into your casual or your restful lifestyle.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So no, I agree with that.
I had previously been running music festivals and working with artists in these communities, and that's been a great expression for me. It's been a really wonderful part of my life to be able to run the Etchings Festival and work in Florence with New York University.
Mm-hmm.
That's been great, but something was missing and has been missing, and I go back to where I come from, the Southwest. And when I was growing up, we practiced a lot of sustainable food, water, energy. And that was missing. And that has been missing from my work currently. Mm-hmm. So creating a model that brings together my passion for the arts and my wanting to create community for artists with some of these principles that I grew up with and that are very close to my heart. That seems to be the next step for me.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of the starving artist is going to be a dead idea.
Exactly.
Because really, as the creative capitalists got us into this industrial revolution and out of agriculture, and agriculture became factory oriented, and that now we're talking about, let's take the creative path and create a different type of lifestyle that involves creativity from individuals and doesn't can it and just make a large, huge model out of it.
But those creative capitalists, at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, they were working on Enlightenment principles. And what's fascinating about that era was the combination of the Enlightenment principles with the industrial model. All we're doing is taking away the industrial model.
Right.
If the principles of Enlightenment that helped shape the Industrial Revolution and helped shape the 20th century, those are still with us. We're not taking those out at all. The idea that everyone's entitled to an education. The idea that everybody, through hard work, can achieve great accomplishment. Those Enlightenment ideals, those hold with us. We're just taking away this industrial model that has not been working for us. We're throwing that out, and we're replacing it with a sustainable model. So you can think of this whole revolution as being a sustainable model, moving out the industrial model, but the Enlightenment principles staying.
No, you're right. You're right. That actually moved it along and over the centuries very quickly, until all of a sudden became too big, and it's kind of squashed the individualism and the creativity out of it.
Right.
Or if somebody was like that, they had to get to the top
Right.
before they could make an effect.
But it makes sense because the Enlightenment ideals were so motivating. I mean, the idea that everyone could have an education, that was such a motivation. No wonder universities said, well, wait a minute, how are we going to organize this? We better, in order to make everybody have an education, we better create equal opportunity. So let's package them all by grade. Let's organize. We have to organize all these people. Let's package them all by grade. When the bell rings, school will start. The conveyor belt system. Everyone will have lunch at noon.
It's a factory.
It becomes a factory, but that was the only way to organize this mass of people who all of a sudden, according to our own principles, which were very virtuous, all needed an education now.
Right,
That's the easiest way to organize it, along the factory industrial model. Well, that's all been proven to be totally ineffective.
It's all
That
going
educational
down.
model has been proven to be totally ineffective. So now what do we need? We need new ways to educate people. We need new ways for artists to come together in various communities.
And the product of what's going on now with the factory food and the factory education, the product is not substantial. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do.
Exactly.
It's defective.
Exactly.
You got a defective product, and it needs to change. The whole system in order of how you produce.
Well, if the product needs to change, it must be needed. The change must need to be in the process.
And the process has to change, right? It's not producing what it needs to.
Right.
Kids aren't educated for the workforce anymore. There's a lot of the food is lousy.
Right.
It's unhealthy.
It's unhealthy.
Bigger. You just pump it up.
It's very
Like
unhealthy,
chickens. You've
and
seen the
people are
chickens, they think-
suffering in health, and then
Yeah.
that puts a huge burden on the health system.
But I think what's important,
Healthcare system, that's huge.
But what's important to say, you know, we're critiquing the system, so to speak, the system. We're critiquing that right now. And what's important to say about it, I think, is that, you know, I'm an optimist. So it's
Right.
not that it's not that the values of the system are wrong, right? The values that we have aspired to throughout the last 150 years are truly virtuous. It's simply that we put in place models that really don't accomplish those values for us. We still talk about them all the time,
Well,
but
it's
we're
the
not
confusion.
we're not accomplishing any of them. That's all. So we need a new model that helps us accomplish the values that we've been talking about for the past 150 years.
That's why you have people like who claim to the 99%. They're confused. They know there's something wrong, but they can't express it. They don't know what it is. They don't realize it's the process.
Right.
And they look at that and say, how do you change that?
Right.
I'm part of that.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like they don't even know where to start.
Right.
The people, reporters went up to him and said, well, what do you want to change? Well, everybody's got
Everything, man.
everything.
Well,
they know there's something wrong, but they don't know what it is.
The most burdensome issue for this Occupy Wall Street movement is student loan debt.
Oh, sure.
That is the number one issue. It's student loan debt. So student loan debt is a product of this educational model that we were just talking about. The factory industrial educational model has created the student loan bubble.
You know what that's like? It's like remember the sharecroppers who they'd come in and they'd live, and the farmer would provide a place for them to live, and he'd pay them, but then they had to buy their food at his store. And by the time they were done, they were in debt. So they couldn't leave.
It's almost modern
So they had
day
to stay there.
slavery. I mean, they're
So
just
this
enslaved to
is
this
no
debt
different.
forever.
And you cannot discharge that in bankruptcy.
Right.
It's there with you forever.
Right.
So you're always in debt. I mean, you can move to China and you still owe it, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, student loans don't go away.
yeah, so it's the modern version of what's it, grapes of wrath, right?
Right. Yes. Yes.
It's basically the same thing, and that's got to stop, because that'll ruin society. There'll be some kind of revolution or something. There'll be some kind of a
Well, there
disaster.
already is.
Yeah, well, you're getting the mild versions of it now, and the housing bubble was a product of the same kind of thing. It's a product of the same thing. What you call sustainable, which is the three elements of living: water, food, and energy. And since I've been involved in the last 5 years in renewable energy, it sort of fit right into that. Didn't know a whole lot about the food, except I was gardening on my own, and I really enjoyed it, and I realized there was a intangible value in gardening and growing your own food and eating it from the garden to the table. And since that, I've gotten to realize that there's a large movement of that sort. But bringing that together with the energy component and the water component is the real value of this kind of an idea. And then John called me one day out of the blue and said he was dealing with this idea of having an artist sustainable community. And I said, wait a minute, John, I've been thinking the same thing. And we all said, oh, we have to get together. So through the series of meetings and phone calls, we decided to come out to Western Mass and the Hudson Valley and look for potential sites for this kind of a thing. So that's kind of how it started for me. How about you, John?
Well, I think that, first of all, just to comment on something that you've said, I think that, and you know, just to move the conversation around a little bit, but I will talk about why this thing started for me. But I think it's very interesting just to comment on your point about the Hudson Valley and New England.
Mm-hmm.
I think that New England and the Hudson Valley both have a real potential for something like this because there's so many converging demographics for something like this in this area. You have so many artists in these nearby metropolitan areas, and you have a huge movement of local farming happening throughout New England and in the Hudson Valley. Mm-hmm. And also the green tech industry has been heavily championed in these areas too. So it's a convergence of all of this great energy in this area, and a reason why something like this project can really take off in a climate like this. So I think I came into this project feeling that energy, feeling those ideas in my own mind starting to converge, talking to artists who needed a place to work on their craft, to continue working on their music or art after college or after graduate school, but who also had these shared values of sustainability and eating local and wanting to know more about their own ability to sustain themselves. So that demographic of young artists really engages these three principles already, and
right.
To be able to find a place for them, a community for them, that seems like just the next step, just to implement something that so many people have already been thinking about and talking about.
Well, you had that one example you told me about, and I've known people like this too, where he had graduated in the arts, and you asked him how he was, and he said, not very good. I said, what's up? He says, well, I'm going bankrupt. I'm declaring bankruptcy.
Exactly, yeah. A good friend of mine in New York.
Huge loans to pay. He had no way of paying them.
Yeah.
And it's just to show that the existing system for how people go to college and go out and get a job, it's not sustainable. It's just not sustainable, especially for a large portion of the population. And we're seeing the sort of the recidivism of that, you know, that's starting to shake out, and you're seeing people doing these kind of things, declaring bankruptcy, even though that's not going to protect them from his student loans, mm-hmm. which is the sad part. Mm-hmm. But here, if he was able to sustain himself and practice his art, he'd have a whole different view of the whole his situation. So.
And this person grew up in an urban environment, so he's kind of this friend of mine is a product of that urban idea.
Farming is very far away for him in his mind, right? Even though it's right there in his backyard.
And when people like this person are approached with the idea, part of the fascination for them is just that it is something other. It is an alternative. To be able to supply this new generation, and they don't even necessarily have to be artists, but to be able to supply this new generation with an alternative lifestyle, that's what's so enticing to them. They may not know the specifics or the details. Once they come in, then they're welcomed into this kind of a new alternative lifestyle. Then they start to understand the benefits of sustainability. But the beginning is just a fascination because they realize something is ultimately wrong and not sustainable with the current mode.
Yeah, they're going to crash and burn. And where are they going to get the income from? Where's an artist going to get that income unless he hits it big? And how many? It's kind of like professional athletes. You get 1 out of 1,000,000.
Yeah.
Then he makes it big. The others have to, you never hear from him again. And they're buried in the society and fighting this cycle of debt. And sustainability gives them an option to go a different path, where they don't accumulate that, and they're actually providing for themselves in a really wholesome way. It's not like you have to get up at 3 o'clock and milk the cows, or work all day and come home and just crash in bed. It's a very healthy lifestyle, and that's really what we're trying to push for the artists. But also, I think my goal in the beginning of this, even before I talked with you about yours, was to have that option open to anyone. Artist, tradesman, stockbroker, whoever you are. Any human being can live this way. And actually, there's a lot of things about this that people have lived before in the past, before we had all these modern conveniences that made us very complacent about providing for ourselves.
I mean, that's what modern society, they're trying to just get you earn enough so you can just pay for everything. Don't do anything for yourself, just pay for it. Personally, I think that model just doesn't work certainly not on a worldwide scale.
You're going to run out of gas. I mean,
you're going to run out of everything. You need something like 6 planets for everyone to live the way we live.
Right.
It just doesn't work.
But I like the idea that what we have come together to design is a community that supports anybody, just as you're saying, and it will take anybody from the existing paradigm and provide them an alternative way of looking at the world, an alternative way of operating in a way. So that even though I came to the table with the idea of wanting a place for young artists to work, the kind of inclusivity that we have now built into the model is very exciting, because in an older model, such as the one we have now, artists work at various art spaces separate from the normal culture, separate from the society.
Right.
And yet this kind of environment we're trying to create truly integrates artists with.
That's a bonus.
Exactly.
It's a huge bonus.
That somebody's paying for them to be there. Typically, they're not paying their own way to be there.
Exactly.
For the most part.
Exactly.
This way, they actually are paying because they're going to pay it in the sense of
contributing to the environment, contributing to the community.
It's a contribution that only costs them time and effort.
And the whole idea that everybody of the community will contribute, not only an artist, not only a stockbroker or an accountant, or anybody who's looking to reinvent their lives and looking to contribute to a community in a much more holistic way, rather than just buying their way through life, being part of a community.
But I still see it as still bringing elements of existing property ownership and things into this community. We're not here trying to create a new commune,
right.
For instance.
That's very important.
That's not our goal. We're trying to give people individual identity, keep that alive, but mix it in with all their contributions so that they create, it's like bring all the parts together and you create a bigger whole. But you still have, the parts are still identified. So people can have their own units where they can own and rent or live and stay or work for. And there's all kinds of options in a community like this. I mean, there are movements like this everywhere, but I think what we're doing here that's unique is bringing all those 3 elements together in one, and everybody participates. But we're still preserving a sense of your own piece of that community that you're proud of and you bring to the community and say, this is what I'm bringing. And I think that's important. And the art part of it is really kind of an added bonus because, like you say, now even when you learn about it in school, art is sort of like, well, you know, it's an elective. It's not required. As a matter of fact, when schools cut budgets, what goes first? The band, the music, that goes first. And these are elements that people don't really know they're missing until they get older and they realize, oh, you know, something's kind of off here. And we're bringing that right into the mix of the community. That's the beauty of the art portion of this. And I think that's going to sort of carry on as you go about doing really other communities that are not really based on art education, but just based on sustainability. The art and cultural part's going to naturally come in there, because that's just naturally part of it. It becomes that way because, first of all, you're growing your own food. You're trying to figure out original ways of using that food, creating culinary delights that are different. There's going to be a whole kind of movement about that. There already is individually, and that alone is an art, and that spreads into other kinds of art activities. And I think you know, it's just a healthy way of bringing all those elements together.
Yeah, I think we want to focus on kind of broadening not only the kind of artistic disciplines that are part of a traditional art space. Usually an art space incorporates music, literature, and some visual arts.
Yeah, like a painter or something like that, right?
So I think we want to broaden the scope of the kind of arts that we incorporate in this art space to include not only the culinary arts, which are so integrated into food production, which is a huge part of this art space, but we also want to broaden the scope to include even other kinds of trades that may not be part of traditional art spaces as they exist right now in the U.S. So one exciting feature of this space will be the inclusion of those artists who maybe work in metal or work in glass. Woodworking, exactly. Right. All of these other kinds of trades will be available for artists here at this space. They might not be able to go to the McDowell Colony for that, or YADA, or the Virginia Center for Creative Arts.
It costs money to go there, right? Or sponsor.
Those artist spaces have a completely different financial structure.
Right.
You know, and they don't have the kind of model. They're very necessary, and they work with very important artists. We're looking at a younger demographic, and we're looking at creating a community that will really nurture a younger demographic of artists across a broader field of disciplines.
Right. And a lot of that art, which is really like almost trade art, could be definitely beneficial to the community. Like, for instance, we are building buildings. We need furniture. There's things to actually build, which a lot of the artists can contribute to. There's architectural type arts, which visual artists, in a lot of sense, can use their talents towards making something look better. So there's really a mix. We want to promote that whole cultural side of the community. And the other thing about the community is it's really based on a lot of people's sweat equity. It's really more of a sweat equity type component, more so than if you just went out and bought a house in a subdivision or bought a condo or even rented something. You're putting in some time which reduces the cost of the whole community, at least the initial cost and the operating costs. So I think those are components that are definitely sustainable, that you need people to input as far as labor, doing things, and the community pretty much 100% takes care of its own needs. I like the properties that we've seen so far, but I think the necessary components to any property would be to have access to water, or readily have the ability to capture water on the property. To have the renewable energy component really can be figured out anywhere, according to what the type of property you have, whether you have a lot of sun, whether you have a lot of wind, whether you have a lot of water, a lot of water falling, you get hydro kind of power. And then agriculture is, we haven't really talked about aquaponics, but there's a lot of different new agricultural compressed and small land required agriculture that produces a lot of food that we're bringing to this project.
And that could work anywhere. That could even work here locally in downtown Boston. We just gotta find a vacant
To work on his porch.
warehouse, ceiling, anywhere, roof rather.
I think there are two interesting features to this project that are maybe at first they're counterintuitive, but they're really important aspects. And one of them is the idea that what we're trying to do is create a model that will be able to map onto other kinds of communities.
Correct.
Because Tom, you have a great line about the suburban model and how this kind of supplants the suburban model. And if we can create a model here, maybe in New England or in the Hudson Valley, then that model can be taken anywhere. So in a way, we are fighting a kind of global trend. And yet, by creating a local community that has local implications, but then wanting to take that and map it out to the world, we are trying to create a society or a culture that could be more globally appreciated. No, you have a good line about the whole idea that you worked previously in the suburban model, and now this is kind of
going to crash and burn. The suburban model.
And it already has. I mean, with housing.
Right, housing the first.
And I was a big part of it, and I was thinking to myself, what the heck are we doing? Why do you need a seventh bathroom? It just doesn't work. So, and it doesn't, the whole suburban model doesn't work for so many reasons.
Yeah, you got a property tax bill of $20,000 a year. You can live pretty good on that somewhere else.
$20,000
without paying property.
Well,
that's just your property tax
bill. Poverty line in many states.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's unsustainable, and nobody's doing anything about that.
Yeah.
It just the bill keeps coming. Okay, well, who's going to pay this when everybody leaves?
Right.
So
it's sort of we're creating sort of a movement away from that.
And who are we trying to appeal that to? It's these farmers who are just doing nothing.
Right.
Small farmers doing nothing with this land.
What we're looking for is we're looking for a farmer who's interested in collaborating with us, who can help to provide land and who has a similar vision for community. But we're also trying to appeal to donors who feel a sense of wanting to contribute to this on a larger scale, or come into this operation and say, wait a minute, I would love to engage in this in the sense of venture philanthropy. I think this can be something very new.
And making a difference. We're appealing to people who want to make a difference, like in this process, get involved in the process and make the difference.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely someone with land. They don't have to be a farmer.
Mm-hmm.
They just have the land and they're thinking, I have this land and I'm wondering what I'm going to do with it. So I'm just going to sell it.
We don't need to appeal to artists. We don't need to make anything that's going to appeal to
artists.
People are going to come to this, no problem.
We
need to think about the kind of the higher level people we need to be collaborating with.
I mean, Jim's really a perfect guy just because he's so overwhelmed by, he can't think beyond next week.
Right.
He's got so many things to do today, tomorrow.
Well, you got those, a couple of crazy guys woofing for him.
But he has a lot of land there for what he alone is doing.
Oh, yeah. And that's the point. Those are the kind of people that are really perfect for this, though. Mm-hmm. Because what we're really trying to do is we're trying to maximize their space.
It's got to be, what do you want out of your land?
I mean, the typical farmer now, who do they call? They call Monsanto, and then they got these giant combines. Most of these guys aren't even doing this themselves anymore. Mm-hmm. So they're hiring people to do it for them.
They're being dictated to on what to plant and how
but the small guy, he really can't compete unless he's running down to the farmer's market. With the aquaponics deal, you can do that year round, and you can do that on a 4 or 5 acre parcel.
Right. Well, I think we're appealing to the landowner, the farmer, the philanthropist who wants to get involved in this, who doesn't have land but has resources that they can put at this.
Those
are the people that we want to effect by
But
this.
even the organic people, I mean, they're jumping through all kinds of hoops nowadays. Just because, again, the government's really pushing
Right.
their thing to. It's very difficult to become organic or
Right.
stay organic.
Well, there's two different stages. There's the sustainable community that's just sustaining themselves and not necessarily selling large quantities. And then there's the farm where you actually have a community that's running a farm and that's selling to the table people, right? So there's that, and those are two kind of options. I think it's healthy to have some component of selling the food out to the community because you're actually getting them more involved by doing that. They're tasting that food versus where they go into Dominic's or the local grocery store.
Now that's actually not a bad idea. In the front entryway, they could just have year-round fresh fruits and vegetables.
Just like the guy up at in Milwaukee, he's got in the front. He has a little store, although it could be better.
Yeah.
The idea is there. You have the people walk. That's where they walk in, and they got rows of stacks of.
You gotta present it more like Whole Foods or.
Yeah, like one of the grocery guys have this down. You walk in, it's all pretty, and buy that first.
Half
Right?
of it's fake and all glossed up.
But it looks beautiful. You want to fill up your cart, and that's you can use all those same philosophies, but do it in a wholesome way.
Yeah.
And I think the idea of the community too is to have a nice, friendly interface with the public as they come into the community. They have a greeting area where there could be a small vegetable produce type of market, as well as a place where you're selling the artists' productions.
Yeah.
Let's say you do have a guy who makes furniture there. Let's say you have a visual artist who's painting. He's got his paintings up. Let's say you got a guy who's writing music. He's got his CDs. You're playing the music over the as they walk in over the air. So there's a lot of different things you can present to people as they walk in, and they have to sit there and assimilate all this. But it's all from the community.